Ja, här i inledningen så har vi faktiskt mött två stycken stora gestalter. Bach med sin musik och Escher, inte så välkänd. Men Escher, bildkonstnären, som i sina bilder presenterar det skenbart motsatta. Som använder ett mönster, upprepningar och motsättningar, precis som Bach i sin musik. De här två namnen är 2 av 3 namn i en märklig bok som kom ut för några år sedan i Amerika. Den är så här tjock. Den heter Gödel, Escher, Bach. Och den är nog så märkligt som en skönlitterär bok om tvärvetenskap, om mänskliga idéer, tidlösa problem, paradoxer, motsägelsefulla meningar. I livet, i konsten, i filosofin, i vetenskapen. Författaren är den unge amerikanske fysikern Douglas Hofstadter. Idag, nyss fyllda 40, arbetar han här vid University of Michigan i Ann Arbor. Han föreläser i computer science, den nya generationens datorer och artificiell intelligens.
Douglas, how many languages do you speak or use sometimes?
Use sometimes is a much better phrase, because speak is very ambitious. I'm very interested in languages, and I speak French fluently from having lived in Switzerland. Other languages that I have studied and speak somewhat are Italian, German, Spanish, Swedish, and then I've done some additional study of a few other languages, but I can't really converse in them. I mean, I can have little conversations, you know, with maybe once in a while have a few minutes conversation in a few other languages, but not much.
This book is sometimes considered to be a little difficult, or just omit a little. I think your interest of languages and the pattern of languages and the loading of words goes through the book in different chapters.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that a deep love of language was involved in the book. Of course, in the English version, it was a deep love of language play and of specifically English. I mean, you probably, as a reader from a different country, are more aware of my interest in other languages. For example, there is, as you mentioned once, a chapter on translation, and I do deal with other languages, but most readers, I don't think, most of the readers who read it in English don't notice that there's an interest in other languages. And I think it probably takes a foreign reader to notice that there is interest in language going all the way through from beginning to end. Absolutely. Interest in structures of languages, interest in how words work, interest in subtleties of expression, interest in crazy kinds of experiments with language, and so forth. Absolutely.
One of the main names in the book is Bach, and you frequently comes up with mentioning his musikalisches Opfer. Is this your favorite?
Well, the musical offering was a piece of Bach's that I got to know when I was around 18, or at least I can remember hearing it for the first time when I was 18. And it took me an incredibly long time to penetrate that work, because I was used to Bach being extremely intuitive for me. I had the earliest works that I got to know by Bach, and still some of my favorites, were some of the most tuneful things, like the Brandenburg concertos and the orchestral suites and the well-tempered clavier and such things. And when I encountered the musical offering, I had expected that it would be natural, and I found that instead it resisted understanding in many parts. And I had to hear it a large number of times, and I don't even think that I would have had the patience to listen to it many times were it not for the fact that a friend of mine was very excited about it, and he really pointed out what was going on in it to me. For example, he pointed out that there was a canon in it that was a crab canon, meaning that there were two voices, that one went forwards and the other went backwards, but they were doing the same melody. And he showed me the score, the musical score, and so I really appreciated it. And then I thought, well, maybe I should listen to this more intellectually rather than trying to have it just be completely emotionally appealing the way most Bach was. And so when I began to look at the score and to try to see the intricate craft of the fugues and the canons, the structure, and so forth, I was able to appreciate it at first at an intellectual level, but then since I was now listening to it over and over and over again, gradually I began to have it penetrated at a more emotional level. But I could never call it my favorite. I would say it's a very, very austere work, but at the pinnacle of Bach's powers. But to me, the favorite works by Bach are the ones that seem to have the most profound emotional resonances. And I still don't feel that the musical offering has as much emotional resonance as something, for example, like the B minor Mass or the St. Matthew Passion or other things. But it's an incredible work, nonetheless.
The other character, the second, is Escher. Well, when did you first see an Escher picture?
That was in the, I think I can give you the exact date. I think it was January 16th, 1966. I remember it because it was a visit to Cambridge that I took with my father. To Cambridge, England. We were, at the time, my family was living in London, and I drove up to Cambridge with my father, and he was meeting with a well-known physicist named Otto Frisch. And I had no idea what I was going to see there, but we went into Frisch's office, and up on his wall was this absolutely stunning print, Day and Night, which, see, I had never heard of Escher, and I had never seen anything like it. And I looked at it, and it just instantly had an enormous effect on me. I thought, this is incredible. The birds going in two directions, interacting with each other, and then as you looked, I mean, first of all, the forms were quite beautiful. The birds were themselves beautiful, but the background-foreground interaction was remarkable. But then, adding to that was the gradual distortion of the birds, where they, as they descended, they became merged with fields, and at the bottom, they were somehow fields instead of birds. And moreover, the fields were formed an area between two small towns, one on the left, one on the right. One was the mirror image of the other, but one was at night and one was during the day. They were exactly identical towns, and I was just struck by the charm of the image, the crazy ingenuity and the beauty of the lines, and it excited me on many levels.
Did you comment on it? Did you say anything to Frisch?
Absolutely, absolutely. I said, my goodness, what is this? Where did you get it? It's an interesting story. I mean, I just couldn't believe that you believe this thing. And I said, where did you get it? He said, oh, this is a Dutch artist named Escher. And he said, I visited him and I bought it from him and so forth. And I said, that's crazy. Can I write to him? Can you give me his address? And he said, of course. So he gave me Escher's address. And this was in '66, as I said, and at that time, Escher was almost unknown. He was known to a small community of people, mostly scientists. I don't know if you've ever visited the laboratories or home of Melvin Calvin, the chemist in Berkeley, but he has dozens of Escher prints, and he was typical of the scientific kind of communities appreciating Escher, but I had never heard of him, and so I wrote to Escher and asked him about the price of this print, Day and Night. He told me it was $75. And I thought, oh my God, that's a lot of money. And so I thought, I can't afford that. I was a student at the time, and I didn't think it made sense. Then I went back to California a year later, and Escher also told me that there was a book of just coming out of his work in German, and that I could see some other prints in it. And so I ordered a copy of the book, and I showed it to my friends in California, and all of them were very excited, without any exception. And so I ordered 15 more copies, and for friends, and they bought them and were very excited too. And then I thought, well, if everybody likes this, well, maybe I should think about it again. So I wrote him again in '67, and I said, how about that? Day and Night and some of the others, what are their prices? Are they still about the same? Day and Night now was $125, and I thought, whew, boy, that's stiff, but maybe I should do it. So I sent in my $125 and got a print of Day and Night, and now it's worth, much, much, much more than that. And of course, the interesting thing is you can now buy unbelievably good photo reproductions of it, the same size, for $4. In a way, it's almost indistinguishable from the actual thing. So it's a kind of a curious thing. On the one hand, to own a real Escher means that you own something that's worth a lot of money. On the other hand, it's indistinguishable from a very good photo reproduction. So,
in your book, well, in this short program, we just can pick a few things, and probably I have to be a little personal. I think you mentioned that science and scientific discoveries in the early 20th century even just acted with with parameters which could be measured and tested, and not real with the human mind and how it functions and all the uncertainties and the paradoxes. Then you mentioned Otto Frisch, who apparently was a good friend of Niels Bohr. And then the quantum physics came with Niels Bohr and the quantum theories. Do you think they were sort of threshold in the scientific thinking?
Well, there's no doubt that quantum mechanics, relativity, utterly changed scientific thought, and changed the many philosophical attitudes about scientific thought. Bohr was extremely fond of the notion of complementarity, and the idea that looking at something from one viewpoint might render it impossible to look at it from another viewpoint. And I think that that sort of notion is a difficult one for. It's a very difficult and a very subtle one for science. And Bohr had a wonderful example, one of my favorites, that he used to say that two complementary qualities of an idea are truth and clarity. That if it's extremely clear, the truth may be diminished, and if it's extremely true, then it may not be very clear.
You agree with that?
Well, I think there is a good deal of truth to it. Of course, it's such a clear idea. It's so simple that it's probably not quite true either.
In some of your dialogues, I think one more or less can listen to Bohr. I can do reading it, because some of the dialogues have those double bottoms, so to speak.
I never heard Bohr or watched Bohr, but I admire him. I admire his lucidity and his the power of his insights and intuitions, and quantum mechanics in general, which is of course one of mostly due to people like Bohr and Einstein. Quantum mechanics had a deep impact on me. I was a graduate student in physics before I wrote my book, Gödel, Escher, Bach. Even while I wrote the first two versions of it, I was a graduate student in physics. And as a matter of fact, just before I began writing my book, in October of 1973, the first handwritten version, I read a book called Our Quanta Real, written by a physicist named Bach. And it was a series of dialogues by Galilean characters, Sagredo, Simplicio, and Salviati, about complementarity and such things. And the spirit of quantum mechanics was definitely in my mind, swirling around when I began writing my book.
So I heard it right then. I
Yeah.
heard it rightly then.
Yeah, I think so.
The third name of the book is Gödel, a little more unknown for the Swedish general viewers, I would think. But, well, he changed mathematics, or he offended mathematicians in a way I think Bohr did with some physics people.
Yes, Gödel had some very, very important insights which overthrew ideas of the most important mathematicians, particularly David Hilbert and Bertrand Russell and others who were working on the foundations of mathematics. In other words, there was a belief at one time that mathematics was a totally logically closed system, and Gödel showed that that such is not the case, and that it doesn't make sense at all. And this meant that there's a certain openness to mathematics, a certain sort of a degree of intuition or non-rigor that is inevitably involved at the edges of mathematics. And it's a philosophically very exciting concept, disturbing at the same time, because it means that one can't exactly know the difference between truth and falsity, and that certain kinds of things that one thought were absolutely God-given are now perhaps matters of opinion. And this makes mathematics, the foundations of mathematics, much shakier and much subtler and more difficult. But it was a wonderful discovery, nonetheless. My interest in Gödel's work was not the impact that it had on the foundations of mathematics, but it was in the fact that Gödel's work it all depended upon his recognizing that mathematical systems have the power to speak about themselves, and this his proof of his famous incompleteness theorem involved a loop in which a system spoke in code about itself, and that subtle idea to me was the exciting one. So in a way, to me, the result, the incompleteness theorem, was not at all what I was talking about in the book, but the idea was mechanisms by which a system can talk about itself. And Gödel was the first one to fully understand how a self-referential system can arise, and to realize the incredible power of such a thing.
That brings us, Douglas, into the artificial intelligence area in which you are active now. But can we go via one other name in your book, Turing? You respect him, you write a lot about his early theories, and sometimes you disagree with his views.
Well, Turing was a wonderful, eccentric English mathematician who had a tragic life, and I guess I have a certain kind of feeling of sympathy for the difficulties of his life, and I wanted in my book to express some sense of empathy for at the time that he grew up he was a child, and he was born around 1912 or so, but when he was growing up and was a young man, he was a homosexual, and in England, maybe in any country, but particularly in England, this was an incredibly difficult time, and he wound up being extremely persecuted, and it was a sad, tragic end to his life, and he is most likely he killed himself. And because of the unusual circumstances of his life, I felt that I wanted to include a little personal material about him. But of course, I wouldn't have done so had he not been a wonderful figure and a very colorful figure in not only in artificial intelligence at the very beginnings of it, but also in mathematical logic. Turing was the first person to carry Gödel's work into the theory of computation and to show that there was a corresponding limitation on the power of computing machines, that Gödel had shown the limitation on mathematical systems. Turing showed that analogously computing machines had fundamental limitations, and in a beautiful modification of Gödel's work. He went on and invented a very fundamental idea called a Turing machine, which is the basis at this time for all discussions of computers. And then he, toward the end of his life, he was really thinking hard about the ultimate capacities of computers, whether they could acquire intelligence, whether they could simulate human beings, whether they could play chess or translate or do all sorts of things that were intellectual or emotional. And he was very interested in the emotional things as well. His article in which he proposed a test for the ability of a machine to think, which is now called the Turing test, was a lovely, well thought out article, simply saying that if you wanted to ask whether a machine could think, maybe it would be more profitable to ask whether it could fool intelligent and perseverant human interrogators into thinking that it was a human being, in that it would be hidden from view, but you would interact via a screen or a teletype or something, but typing.
The three persons.
Yes,
Yeah.
there would be a person in one room, a person in the second room, and a machine in the third room, and the interrogator would be able to address questions to either the person or the machine, but there would be no knowledge of whether there was a person in this room or a machine in this room. So you would have to try to make a distinction by asking subtle questions. And I think that the Turing test is a very, very deep probe of thought. And Turing I think Turing gave all the correct arguments for it in his article, but I think it's unfortunately too little appreciated.
I think it would be wrong to have you on Swedish television not talking Swedish, Douglas. Do you know the word dumklokarna, the translation, the Swedish translation? Vad kan dumklokarna göra om 50 år?
Om 50 år? Ja, jag har ingen aning. Ja, om 50 år är vi 2000... Nej, det är 85, 35. Jag har ingen aning. Jag kan inte säga, men maybe we should go back to English for me to try to predict the future. It seems to me that I'm very loath to predict the future about computers because I just don't have a crystal ball. But it would surprise me enormously if we had domklockarna or anything you want, any kind of mechanical or human-created machinery that could perform as well as people. I think that that's a much, much longer-term goal than 50 years. But it seems to me that we will have much deeper theories, models of the mind in 50 years. Theories particularly, I hope, about perception, visual, auditory, and abstract perception. Partly this involves memory. I think that probably the central question about mind is the nature of memory, permanent memory, how concepts are stored and organized and interact and overlap, and how a given occasion or circumstance addresses a very specific portion of memory, and how one pulls out just the right...
The grandmother's cell?
Well, if that existed, I think I would be very surprised. A marvelous discovery about the title of my book, approximately a year or two after the book had been published. And it was really very nice for me because it expressed something that, for me, is very true. And it has to do with my feelings about Bach. And if you write the title of the book, ordinarily, in an ordinary way, it's just Gödel, Escher, Bach. But if you regroup it simply in the following way, you let the umlaut fall off the O and land over here. So now it's God, and then we will separate. Put in some spaces, and that's all we do. And this is Spanish meaning he is, and this is of course French meaning dear. So what we get is God, he is dear Bach. And to me this was a very true statement, that if anybody, human, has a spark of the divine in it, it would be Bach. So I felt that this was a wonderful accident, because on a very subconscious level, or very accidental level, my book was expressing a truth, a real truth, as far as I was concerned. Very sincere belief about Bach. The only person that I would also say this about, other than Bach, might be Einstein.